My commitment was to Sam, and we agreed that Dustin was our number one choice. And he spent a weekend with me, and I had a house in the country. I was living in the East, a house in upstate New York, and I was married at the time, and my wife was shocked that I was a little bit anxious when he poured vodka in his orange juice at breakfast time, and then brandy in the coffee, and then he didn't drink anything except wine until lunch, and then after lunch he started seriously drinking. But he was the kind of I don't even want to say he was a drunk, because I just think he drank too much, but he was the kind of man that you don't know he's a drunk until he shows up sober. I mean, he was not sloppy, he was not falling down, and there was never a time when he wasn't on top of his game until the last pictures, when he had, when he was really in trouble with substance of every sort, and his destructiveness had taken over at that point. The other part of it is that Sam was paranoid, and he would write memos at the end of the day. And because we had adjacent offices, and the door was always open between our, and I was always copied on the memos, but there were memos to the studio complaining that we lost 9 minutes because the wardrobe wasn't ready. We lost an hour because the production didn't think to do, And I finally said to him, I said, Sam, who do you think is going to read this crap? and he had a moment of honesty, and he said, it's a catharsis for me, don't worry about it. And he was writing to his lawyer, who ended up being my lawyer by years later. And we talked to him and joked about it. He said, I would get those goddamn memos. And he said, I don't know what you must have been going through. But at the end of Katie Haber said something interesting, because very often our arguments were public, and people weren't around for all the intimate moments. And but Katie said something to me that touched me. I knew that Sam liked me, and he was very flattering at various times. But she said, Sam loved you. And I said, come on. She said, no, I spent enough time with him, and he, when he was relaxed and talking from his heart. And that made me feel very good, because I think there was a part of me, this was my first movie. I'd worked in television, and this was my first film, and I was making it with a world-class director. So to find out that he trusted me, and that he had feelings for me, was probably disproportionately pleasing to me. And at the end of the film, I don't know if your research has come across this, but you do know the result, I'm sure. But he walked into me. The plan was that we were going to do an assemblage in London at Twickenham, and then ship the film back, and we would, all the editing and the post would be done in Hollywood. And it turned out to be economically beneficial, but it was also just a question of convenience. After 6 months sleeping in a hotel bed in one city or another, you really want to get to your own digs. And Sam walked in, and he said, he closed the door, and he brought a bottle of brandy with him, and couple of tumblers around my office, and he poured us each a drink, and he said, Dan, he said, you're the best producer I've ever worked with. He said, Dan, you're the only kid. He said, kid. He said, you're the only creative producer I've ever known or even heard of. And he said, Dan, you're the only man I would ever trust with my film. And he started to go on. I said, Sam, cut the crap. You've got another gig, and you want me to take over the editing responsibility. He said, right. He had been offered Junior Bonner. Sam was working in Arizona or Tucson or someplace with the Steve McQueen, and every weekend or every 10 days, whenever Sam knew he was going to have a clear day or half a day because of what the schedule was on that picture, Roger and I would go down. We would, ship down the barrel of film and review, on a projector on a sheet in his room, and I had learned a great deal about editing from Sam when we were doing Noon Wine, and so and it affected my style. I've spent a lot of time in the editing room on a picture, always with the invitation of the director. I would never impose. I think that there are certain protocols that I think are important, and but in this case, I had the responsibility. We reversed roles, really. I was doing what the director does, and he was doing what the producer does, in terms of this film at that point. So we would ship the film down, and he was incredible because, as I said, I had learned his style, and Roger had picked it up. He didn't get a chance to spend a lot of time with Sam during the shoot. Some directors spend every free moment with the editor, and others, don't really care because they know at the end of the day they'll put whatever they want in. But I would say to him, he'd say, that's a bad cut. There's a shot missing. And I said, Sam, we agree with you. It is a bad cut, but the shot is missing because you didn't shoot it. And he'd say, there's a two-shot over the shoulder. And Roger would say, and I know because we had looked for it so hard in the editing room, he said, Sam, you never shot it. And look at the continuity, it doesn't indicate. And Sam would say, if you look and the strip at the end of the take, I bring the camera around and that's your two-shot, that's your transitional shot. And he was always right. He was always right.